So we'll give them a few more minutes. Who are we waiting on? Thomas. John Dutch. Okay. You'll have a good break though? Good break? Was it relaxing, or did you just work? You actually, you know what? This is probably the first time in several years that my winter break, I feel like I've come out of it. I'm like, okay, I've had my time. I enjoyed that. I actually got to relax. So maybe that's what's happening for everybody. All right, we are at 9:30. I like to start on time. So, no, I don't think so. Maybe. All right. We're missing a couple people, but I think that's okay. So, guys, welcome. So, this is human sexual behavior. The first thing that I like to teach all of my students once they get into my class, the very first slide is when someone gets in front of you and they say that they're going to be lecturing to you about something for the next 3 to 4 months, you should probably figure out what their credentials are. So I want to give you that first. Couple of bits of proof that I am qualified to teach this class. The first thing is I do have a doctorate. And I want to explain what being a doctor means. It doesn't mean that you know everything, and it doesn't mean that you are some omniscient being. There's actually going to be a lot in this class that I will not know, because it turns out sexuality is one of those areas that's very poorly studied, and a lot of new stuff is still coming out today. So what that doctorate qualifies me to do is to know what I don't know. That's really what getting a doctorate will earn for you. It gets you. It specializes you in a very narrow focus of a topic. But more than that, it makes you aware of, when you do that, it makes you aware of just how much you don't know. So my first thing that I can promise you is that in this class, if I do not know something, I will not bullshit you. I will tell you I don't know this, and in fact, maybe let me look it up, kind of look at some sources. I'll come back to you next class. All right. So that's number one. Number two, I do publish a lot of research. This is what I'm known for on campus. I've carved a little niche for myself. It's very nice. What I do is I will administer various surveys, experiments that ask questions about relationships, sexuality. I also tend to take an explicitly evolutionary approach to a lot of my research. So in that field, I tend to gather data using the methods of those fields. I then analyze that data using statistics, and then I write up the results of that data and I try to publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. So, my first question to you, what's a peer-reviewed journal? What do you guys know about this? What have you heard? Ever heard of these?
Is it like worked on as a group?
In a way, yeah. Yes. So there are peers involved. So peers are helping me with this. But how is it how is that happening within a group? That's the important part of this. Peer review. So if you were to write something, anything, and then you were to submit it to something like a newspaper or just any old journal, it would go to an editor, and the editor would say, okay, I kind of like this. This is something that we could potentially publish. I have a few of these comments, and then we'll put it out there into the world. They don't do that much quality checking for the content of what is written. Usually they just edit, with the wording, how well it'll be delivered once it's published, etc. So there's not a lot of quality control when you look at newspapers and you look at journals and you look at magazines. But there's another category of journal that in science called a peer-reviewed journal, and what this looks like is when I write up my data into a manuscript and I submit it somewhere, what that editor is first going to do is they're going to take it and they're going to distribute it to 2 or 3 other people who also specialize in whatever that topic is. And they are going to be motivated to rip that thing apart, because if I publish it, that means they don't get to publish it first. So I have to do that. I have to collect that data. I have to analyze it well enough to convince people who don't want to see me succeed, I have to convince them that it's good enough to be published. They will give me feedback. I'll then usually have to make some revisions. I have to resubmit, and then they give me more revisions, and then it's a back and forth process with my peers. Then, if they finally say, okay, this is good enough, then it gets published. So this is a very long, it's an iterative, it's a difficult process, and so I'm pretty well experienced in that. And some of the stuff that I published, just to give you a taste, I don't want to linger on this too much because I want to kind of get into the discussion in this class, but to give you an idea of what I look at very early on, the thing that I published more than 10 years ago at this point was my first publication was something on what's called mate poaching. You guys know about, have you ever heard of mate poaching before? What does it sound like? So if you were going to poach someone's mate, yeah.
Well, this may be so wrong, but it kind of sounds like picking and choosing.
Picking and choosing what? Yes. Oh yeah, Megan.
It sounds like, say your friend has a girlfriend and then you go steal his girlfriend.
Yeah, that's it, right. Poaching, right? So poaching, when you poach an animal, you're hunting it illegally, right? We're not literally hunting people here, but we consider if you're in a relationship and then you go after someone who's in a relationship and you want to start your own relationship with that person, we consider it poaching. That's just flavorful language we use. So I've investigated things like mate poaching. I've studied infidelity and some of the decisions that people make around infidelity. I've looked at the personality traits that lead people to commit infidelity, to choose infidelity as something that they wish to do, or to choose to poach people's partners. I've looked at the reasons that people stay friends with an ex. To give you the short of this, prior to this study, we didn't have a comprehensive list of the reasons that people tend to stay friends with an ex. And so what we did was we surveyed people and we just asked, okay, why would one stay friends with an ex? We took these responses, we then made them into a measure, a survey, and then we administered it to other people, and we asked them things like, how likely would you be to stay friends with an ex for this particular reason? And what we found were things like, well, maybe they were sentimental. It was a sentimental relationship. You had been friends for so long, and maybe you were friends even before you ever got into a romantic relationship. You value them. 1 second.
You're working and projecting?
Yep, all of it. Awesome, thank you. So it might be a sentimental relationship. You want to hold on to it, right? And that was the predominant reason that people stayed friends with an ex. But there were other reasons too. Things like, well, it was practical to have them around. They knew how to fix a car. They consistently gave me money for things. They knew how to fix stuff. So for practical reasons, you might stay friends with an ex. Also things like you had shared children together or you had shared social circles, right? So if you get together with someone and then you kind of build a friendship network together and then you break up, one of the weird things that happens is, well, who stays friends with whom? You start to take sides, right? So you might stay friends just for the sake of keeping everything cool within the friendship group. But then there were also things like, well, you want to stay friends in order to continue to have sex with your ex. And so what we did was we looked at the reasons that people stay friends with an ex for various, depending on various characteristics, including a person's sex, whether they identified as male or female. And then also dark personality traits, which broadly speaking, characterize a person's willingness to do shitty things to other people if it helps them. So that is, are you willing to do something that hurts someone else if it's ultimately going to benefit you? And we found that people who scored higher on these traits, so they were more likely to do that, they were more willing to stay friends with an ex for those practical reasons. That is, they had a car, they had money, they could fix stuff, and in order to continue to have sex. So kind of looking at some of the motivations that people have for forming relationships, usually in kind of nefarious ways, as well as how that overlaps with sex and sexuality. And so I've looked at also the degree to which people prioritize trust in a relationship. You know, we make a big deal about how physically attractive someone is, maybe how much money they make or how stable their job is, how fun are they? Do we share hobbies together? But something people don't think about initially or immediately when they think about relationships or sex is just how important it is to be able to trust someone, right? This is something we assume, usually, that we can trust someone because you feel close to them, you want to be near them. But if you really step back and evaluate that, people tend to prioritize trust over pretty much every other trait that you can ask them about in a potential partner, even if it's for a short-term relationship. You don't want to be doing something casual with someone who ultimately you don't trust because they could hurt you. Besides that, another thing that's going to come up in this class, because we're talking about sexuality, is, well, part of sex is not just literally the act of sex or relationships, but we're going to find out that sex has a very strong biological basis. There's a reason that we have sex, and there's a reason that men and women tend to differ in the ways that they look, the ways that their bodies develop. What I've looked at in the past are the ways in which facial attributes develop as a consequence of things like sex hormones, of the experiences that you have growing up, and looking at the degree to which people care about these traits. So looking at how much do you care that someone looks like a prototypical male or a prototypical female, and that's what we call sexual dimorphism. That is two morphs, two forms, male, female. Things like fluctuating asymmetry refers to maybe how symmetrical your face tends to look. Turns out people who are rated as more attractive, they tend to have a more symmetrical face, whereby the left side and the right side of their face look more similar to one another. You can kind of test this out a little bit if you just take like a piece of paper and then you take a picture of yourself and you kind of, look at both sides of your face. You'll notice that everyone is a little bit asymmetrical. There's no one who is perfectly symmetrical. But the idea is, if you are more symmetrical, that's indicative of usually throughout your lifespan, you've had good what's called developmental health. That is, maybe you haven't gotten sick a lot. You've had the nutrition that you've needed to develop the features of your body that you need to. When you are malnourished, when you get sick a lot, you tend to see as people get older, they do tend to look a little bit more asymmetrical, less symmetrical. And then also color cues to health. So I'm not talking about the skin colors that contribute to ethnicity, but more so everyone has there are three primary pigments in skin. There's yellow pigment, there's a red pigment, and there's a blue pigment. We don't really see the blue pigment that often, but the yellow pigment is what contributes to, if you're having a day where maybe you've experienced this recently because people are getting sick, but when you get sick and then you look at yourself in the mirror, you kind of have that washed out look to you. You just look a little bit more pale. Turns out that is related to your body's ability to synthesize this yellow pigment that then contributes to how you look, whether you're kind of more glowing or not. So when you're sick, you tend to look less glowing. You tend to have fewer of those pigments. And then red pigmentation helps with things like blushing and kind of the redness of the skin, which actually in small amounts tends to be considered attractive. But if you have a large amount of red pigmentation, or it's kind of splotchy and it's not as evenly distributed, that tends to be perceived as less attractive. So we're going to be looking at some of these, we're going to look at the logic of some of this. Why would people care so much about whether you look like a prototypical male or a prototypical female? Why would people care about these attributes when they're selecting them as sexual partners? And then where my research currently exists, where I currently am and what I focus on, what I publish on right now, are relationships known as consensually non-monogamous relationships. These are things like polyamory, open relationships, swinging relationships. There's a lot that we don't know about this kind of demographic of people because most people identify as monogamous. They're paired to to give some definitions. They identify as monogamous. They are paired with just one and only one other partner. But there are people who can consensually, among partners, everyone agrees to form multiple relationships for whatever reason. And that would be non-monogamy. And so it's consensual because everyone's on board. This is not infidelity insofar as no one's lying to each other. They're just saying, I would like these other relationships, let's negotiate how this could work. So I look at these kinds of relationships, and I've started to look at some of the things that I looked at in older studies, like mate poaching, like infidelity, like lying and trust, jealousy and consent within these different types of relationships, and trying to characterize those. And then, broadly speaking, this actually just came out last year. I did publish a handbook with Oxford University Press. This monster is like 30 chapters long. I co-edited it. So I had a bunch of people submit their manuscripts, their chapters that they wanted to publish. I had to edit them, give them feedback. It was like the peer review process, but for my own book. And so this came out. And so, again, my point in all this is to give you some evidence that I'm qualified to teach this class and that I'm worth listening to for the semester. Beyond that, though, beyond all the professional stuff, I want to give you some just personal details. So first of all, one of the big pieces of my personality is that I'm actually a pretty huge nerd. So I play a lot of games. I used to play a lot more. When I was younger, I played a lot of video games and board games. I just don't really have as much time for it, but I still have that soul inside me. It's kind of funny to think about this. I think now, especially if you go on certain parts of social media, people debate all the time as to whether video games are a valuable use of your time. What I've personally found, and the reason that I like video games compared to things like watching TV or just like binge watching movies, etc., is that with a video game, you are this person who you are plopped in this unfamiliar environment, right? A game is just something you don't, it's got rules, it's got limitations, it has, there are people you can play with. These rules you don't understand. It's a world that you don't understand. You are put into that world, and then you are told, figure it out. Figure out this puzzle and win it. That's kind of fun because I think that you are actively engaging with media when you play something like a video game. So I'm unconvinced that it's an unhealthy way to spend your time. I think that you could overdo it, but I think that's true of almost anything in life. You can overdo anything. Originally, so I didn't grow up in South Carolina. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I lived in it's like an hour north of Philadelphia. Funnily enough, I never really went to New York City, but it was only a couple hours away from New York City. I grew up there. I went to college in Pennsylvania. I got my master's degree in Pennsylvania. Then I went to Michigan for a while, and I lived in Michigan, specifically Detroit. And I lived in Detroit for about 5 years. That was, if you ever get a chance to kind of go live in a city for a while. So I grew up in a fairly more rural area, and then I moved to a city for 5 years. If you get a chance to live in a city, at least for a period of time, it's a good experience. It's kind of a different environment altogether. So I encourage it as just a way to kind of enrich yourself. But I lived there for 5 years, and then I moved down here, and I've been at the university for going on 7 years now. So I've been here for a hot second. One thing that you'll learn about me is that I don't really like to self-adorn too much. So self-adornment is just decorating yourself. We're going to talk about this because it turns out sexuality and some of our motives towards sexuality have a lot to do with self-adornment, right? We adorn ourselves, we make ourselves appear a certain way. We wear certain types of clothes, we carry certain types of items, a watch or whatnot, or a purse, you wear makeup, you put on jewelry, etc. These are all self-adornments. And really, these are for showing something to someone else, right? You're kind of displaying. Well, I don't really like to display that much. This is just a preference of mine. This is probably the nicest that you will ever see me dressed, but as the semester goes on, you're going to notice that I get a little bit more disheveled. I'm fine, everything's okay, I'm not going off the deep end, but I like to be comfortable. And I would encourage you all to be comfortable too in this class. I prioritize feeling comfort, being able to we're going to have a lot of discussions in this class. We're going to talk to each other a lot. So I would like you to be relaxed as well as you can. I do like public speaking. Originally, I didn't. When I was growing up, I would say until maybe like late high school, early college, I really didn't like public speaking. Then I started to see it a certain way. I saw it as it's a puzzle, right? When I'm standing up here and I'm talking to you guys, I have to explain myself. I have to explain the content in this class in such a way that it enters your mind and then it stays there and it inspires you to think a certain way. That's really hard to do. That's public speaking. And I like puzzles. So as soon as I started seeing public speaking as a puzzle, that actually helped me a lot with some of my some social anxiety that, I used to experience a lot more. I encourage you to think of public speaking that way. If you're wondering what wavelength I'm at, where my brain is at, I don't tend to drink that much caffeine or anything, but sometimes if I have a busy day like today, I'll have caffeinated tea. I don't put any sugar in it. I'm not a big fan of sweet tea. I just can't get into it. I'm sorry, guys. But that's usually where I'm at. This is actually, I recommend if you are someone who is consistently intaking tons and tons and tons of caffeine, if you've taken my Psych 101, you know why that's not going to work for you in the long term, because your body's going to become accustomed to that caffeine, and then you need more and more and more of it in order to get the same effect. I like to be strategic about caffeine, and really any drug in my life, where I don't consistently use it because it loses its effectiveness. What you should do instead is figure out when precisely you need to use that drug, precisely when you might need a little extra stimulation to get through your day. But beyond that, don't make a habit out of it. That's just a piece of wisdom I've acquired. I tend to stay away from, at this point, I stay away from most drugs, but caffeine is one of those that it's hard to avoid sometimes. But use it strategically. All right. That's a little bit about me. We'll learn about each other more as this class goes on. I do want to learn about you guys. I know that many people are not super keen on sharing things about themselves in class around other people. So here's what I ask. There is something online in Blackboard called a student information sheet. I'll show you where this is when I go over Blackboard. But it's really basic stuff like what's your name, what's your major, why are you taking this class, what do you hope to get out of it. That just gives me a bit of information about who you are, why you're here, what's your motivation for being here. And then I can tailor this class a little bit more to you guys. I like to do that when I can. So that's going to be one of the assignments before next time is please complete the student information sheet so I know what we're getting into. But let's go through Blackboard. Let's go through the syllabus. I'll try not to spend too much time because, like I said, I want to get talking with you guys as well. But if you go, you're going to need Blackboard in this class. So if you've not tried to access Blackboard yet, make sure you do. And if you have any troubles, contact me and contact Information Technology, the help desk, right away. But this is our class. So here's what you need. There are several tabs along the top here. The only thing you're going to need is anything under content, and then you'll have the grade book. And you might access messages sometimes. If I send out emails, the email will, and a copy of it will be right here if you misplace it or you want to revisit it. And then the grade book here, all of this is going to calculate properly, meaning that if I put a grade into the grade book, Blackboard's automatically going to go all the way down to overall grade, and it's going to calculate your current overall grade. So if you're ever curious where you stand, this will be accurate. All right, you can check yourself. But let's look at content. If you're ever confused about where we are in class, what's due, go to the course schedule, and this is taken directly from the syllabus. So let me see if I can blow this up. Let me just do it this way. This is going to be our course schedule for the semester. So it tells you precisely, okay, there's the date, today's January 13th, and then next time we're meeting the 15th, and it goes down the left side here. It's going to tell you the topic of that day. There's a reading that is assigned for each day. This is a reading-heavy class. I want to warn you guys ahead of time. Yes, there's the textbook, and I want you to have the textbook, but more importantly are these, well, not more importantly, everything's important, but very importantly are these readings here that have names and then years. These articles that I've assigned, these are peer-reviewed scientific articles. So I talked about those peer-reviewed journals. These are going to be papers that were published in those kinds of journals. That's what we'll be reading. That's what we'll be learning to digest. Some of these papers are pretty dense. If you've not taken a class like this before, an upper level, 300 level class, you may not have read many of these kinds of papers before. There's an art to it, and we'll discuss that art. But it's important that you guys are ready to read. That's going to be a big part of this class. But the readings are listed there. And then on the right side, it's going to tell you what is due on that day. You'll notice that there's always something due, at least what are called discussion questions. I'll go over these in a second, but for every single class, what you're going to do is there's going to be a reading. You'll read that reading. You'll then write some discussion questions about it, and then you have to turn in those discussion questions before class each day. That's the most consistent thing you need to be doing in this class, all right? Here's the timeline, though. Today's the introduction, and then we're actually going to first start with a bit of biology. Turns out the reason that we have sex, the reason that people have sex, but also the reason that we care about differences between men and women so much, is that there is a biological basis for why sex exists. So we're going to go into that first. And that's going to give us the nuts and bolts that we need to understand the rest of the class. We'll do that for a couple of weeks. We'll kind of get into some topics here. Then we're going to start getting into a bit of anatomy, really delving into reproductive systems. So we're not really going to be talking too much about breasts or body hair or things on the outside. We're going to be looking at internal reproductive structures. We're going to be trying to understand the parts that we'll be talking about for the rest of the class, both for women as well as for men. And then we'll talk about a bit of fertility, contraception. We're going to get into hormonal contraception. We're going to talk about abortion at one point in this class. What I like to do is I like to actually have a debate about abortion, because there are plenty of debates right now happening about whether abortion is something that should be legal or not. And so I like to go through the philosophy of that and try to kind of make sense of that debate a little bit. We'll get into sexual development, and we'll talk about kind of sexual development in terms of physical aspects of the body, but also the brain. Because remember, this is a psychology class. We're going to be talking about the brain a lot. And it turns out your brain is sexually differentiated to some degree. If you look at even very early on in life, there was actually a paper that just came out late last year that they took newborns and they put them through MRIs, so magnetic resonance imaging. You can get images of brains and brain activity from an MRI. Even that early on, you tend to see differences in brain structure and activity between male and female children, infants, before they've had experience out in the world to be socialized. So we're going to be looking at some of those differences that arise because of biology, but also differences that arise and develop because of the way that we are socialized. We'll talk about what it means to be transgender. I think that is also a very poorly understood topic, so we'll get into that. And then we're going to start talking about sexual relationships, how people form relationships, how they maintain relationships. And then we'll finish everything off with a section on sexual orientation. Who are you sexually attracted to? What features, what traits do you tend to be attracted to? And then we'll go from there. So that's the roadmap. If you're ever confused about what we're doing on each day, you should be tracking what's due and what we're going to be reading using this course schedule, which again you can find in Blackboard underneath course schedule. When we go to syllabus, if you're ever looking for anything in this class and you can't find it, you don't know where it is, it's probably under syllabus and course docs. This is the syllabus. I haven't printed them out for you. I like to save paper, so get on your computer. We'll look. I'll kind of go through the syllabus with you, but it's here if you need it. If you ever have trouble with technology, this is an FAQ document. You should just get in contact with the help desk. But if you want to resolve it yourself, this document has a number of common solutions to common problems that people have with the technology on campus or even on your own computer. So make sure to look at that. The Opportunity Scholars Program, this is a very cool program. It's hosted through kind of the TRIO program, which is a group dedicated to it's kind of a funding mechanism for helping students as they go through university. I recommend you look at this and you sign up for this, even if you don't think that you might use some of these services. Throughout the semester, if you are already part of this program and you have access to some of these resources, you may find that you need them halfway through the semester, and then it's a good thing that you signed up. So what they do is they provide individual tutoring, advising, they host workshops, they usually have cultural events. Sometimes in the past, I don't think they've done this as much recently, but they've taken trips to different places as cultural events. They have computer labs and other resources that you don't get access to unless you're part of OSP. And for some people, they have financial grant assistance. So for some people, you might actually get money by joining this. So please be aware that that is a thing on campus, and you should sign up for it. That student information sheet, that's right here. Like I said, please complete this before next time. If you have a laptop in front of you right now, or you just want to make a note for it, you could start doing this right now as I'm talking. This isn't very intensive, so if you just kind of want to get on there, get this done, submit it right away, I'm fine with that, even while we're in class. But please do that before next class. Any of the readings that are not required, I'm going to put in here. You might think, why would I ever want to read something that's not required? Throughout this class, I'm going to be making some claims, and if I feel that, okay, I'm making a claim that I feel like needs evidence, I feel like I need to convince you guys better, I want to give you original material that you can, if you want to learn more, you can kind of deep dive into it. If that's ever the case, I'm going to put those readings here. There are already quite a few readings in here that are very interesting. And so if you just want to go and explore that, that's fantastic. But any time that I say, oh, okay, guys, I've looked into this, I want to give you a little bit more, this is where those readings are going to end up. They're not required, but sometimes people get an education because they're, just looking to have fun getting an education and learn stuff. All right, how many of you have gotten the textbook at this point? How many of you have it or have ordered it? Have you ordered it? All right, you will need the textbook for this class, so it should be ordered, all right? If you don't want to order it, make sure you have access to it somehow. I don't care how you have access to it, I just want to make sure you're doing the readings. But I know that some of you may not, you might still be waiting on the textbook to come or you haven't ordered it yet, so what I've done is for the first couple of readings, which you'll see here, so for January 15th and for the 22nd, you're going to have to read Appendix A. We're starting with the appendix. That's here. So I've taken that, I've downloaded it, I've uploaded it here for you. I can't do that for the full book, but I wanted to make sure that if you're still waiting for the book to arrive, you haven't ordered it yet, you can still get access to these first couple of readings. So your timeline is you absolutely need your book by this date, February 3rd. All right, that's when you're going to have to do your first textbook reading from the textbook itself. So make sure to get on that. There will be a midterm, and there's going to be a handout that I give you for that, as well as a handout for the final exam. We'll get into all that later. Okay, let's, before I get into some of this, the term paper and the assigned readings, let me actually skip to the syllabus. So let's start going through this thing. You're probably, most of this stuff is pretty straightforward. That's my name, the course section. That's when we're meeting. The class location. So this is the Allendale syllabus. There is one for the Walterboro people as well. The class location is, of course, here, and then in Spruce. You already knew that. You already know this. On Allendale, my office is downstairs. Still in Spruce. It's downstairs, And it's in that little suite of offices that are right next to the stairs. Kind of, if you're looking at the building, it's going to be on the front of the building. It's at the far left side of the building. So it's that little suite of offices, and it's room 102. Here in Walterboro, my office is, if you go out the front, if you go out this door here, hang a right, go into the stairwell, and then just keep going across. There's a little suite of offices. I'm in there. So I hold office hours for here in Walterboro. I believe I have my office hours listed as right after this class. I think 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then in Spruce, I'm actually going to be there on Wednesdays from 11 to 1 p.m. as I mentioned to you guys. So I'm going to be sharing locations, sharing between these two locations. All right, some things. I do want to read this disclaimer. So this course does deal with sexually explicit content and topics that may make some students uncomfortable, such as sexual fetishism, assault, prostitution, abortion. The course content may also challenge your beliefs about gender and sexuality and sexual orientation. These challenges are less about making you change your mind per se, and more about helping you refine your opinions while becoming clear and informed about what you think about sexuality. So I'm not here to tell you what to think, but rather kind of, I think, challenge you to think about some things in a way that you may not have thought about them before. So if you do not feel you can cope with the content for any reason, I do suggest you enroll in a different class. We're going to be talking about some touchy stuff in this class. And we'll be respectful about it. It's not going to be weird, but it is stuff that I think can be difficult for some people to engage with. So please be aware of that. Otherwise, here's the course description. You can read that at your own pace. Here's the book, and I think I mentioned this to a few of you already. The current edition of this book is the 6th edition. What I have listed here is the 4th. The reason for that is usually the older editions are cheaper if you look for them, maybe outside of the bookstore. But the other reason is I've looked at the changes in the 5th and the 6th edition. There are certainly new things coming out about sexuality all the time. There are differences between the editions, but as it's relevant to this class, for your readings, you can get away with the 4th edition. Anything that's new, I'm going to incorporate into lecture. And the stuff that you're going to be reading has largely stayed the same because we're from the textbook because it's a lot of basic information about sexuality. So please make sure to get that book. Like I said, it is required, unfortunately. All right, here's the grade determination. This class is going to be very discussion heavy, participation heavy. I'm just talking at you right now, but it's going to be there's going to be discussion, there's going to be lecture. So I'm going to expect you to be participating quite a bit. And the way that you're going to participate is through the discussion questions that you need to write each class. So this is going to be worth 20% of your course grade. Good chunk. My expectation is before each class, you will need to have written at least 3 discussion questions per reading. That is, you are writing your own questions. I do not have questions pre-written for you that you need to answer. I want you to read these articles, and as you're reading through them, you go, I don't quite understand this, so I kind of want to ask about it in class. Or, this is a really interesting topic, and it makes me think of this other thing. And then you might want to ask a question about that. I just want you to be able to, these questions should pertain to the reading material and then be phrased in a way that encourages class discussion or helps clarify an important concept. Think about the kinds of questions you could ask in class that might actually get a really interesting conversation going. That's what you're aiming for. I want to see that you've engaged with the readings, and I want to see that you've you're thinking deeply about the readings and that you have questions about them and you want to talk about them. That's what I'm looking for. That is participation. So make sure to complete these discussions before class about each reading and then turn them in before class as well. That's going to be a requirement. I will not accept these late. I want you to come prepared to this class having read whatever reading for that day. There is a term paper in this class. This is going to be worth 30% of your course grade. Over the course of the semester, you're going to submit 5 assignments. You're going to construct a term paper on a topic of your choosing, and this topic must be related in some way to human sexuality or sexual behavior. What you're going to do is you're going to build a literature review. That's the big part. That's kind of the difficult part. That's what gets people tripped up in this class. Have you guys written literature reviews before for other classes? Have you gone and looked for original peer-reviewed scholarship and summarized it? Okay, great. You're going to learn how to do that here. It's a difficult skill, but if you stick with it and you do it well, you're going to become a better writer and you're going to be a better communicator of science as well. If you want to be someone who, you can kind of talk clearly about, what research is being done in this field, this is going to help you be much clearer about that. So you're going to build a literature review of current scientific research on that topic, whatever topic you choose. You're then going to develop a testable hypothesis to address an unresolved research question, that whatever question you might have. So you're going to create this literature review. You're going to summarize what already exists about my topic. So if you're curious about, bisexuality, or you're curious about non-monogamy, or you're curious about gender, right, or being transgender, if this is something that's that's interesting to you, you're going to summarize the scientific research. Then at the very end of your summary, you're going to say, well, people have looked at this, and they've looked at this, and they've looked at this, but they haven't yet looked at this part of the topic. That's going to be your goal. You're going to summarize the research, and then you're going to identify something new that hopefully no one's ever thought of before. At least in an ideal world, that's the way that goes. So you're going to develop a testable hypothesis, and then once you've identified that question that you really want to address, you are going to be designing an experiment to test it. Now, if you've taken my Psych 101, you're familiar with these last two steps of developing a hypothesis and designing something to test it. You're going to be doing this in a much more thorough way than in my 101 class. But if you're familiar with hypotheses, you're familiar with just designing experiments, that part should be more straightforward. Again, most people have not done a literature review, so please be aware that this will probably take you time and be a bit of a challenge, but that's a good thing. And then in this class, here's the funny thing about a 300 level class. There are going to be 2 exams here. I am not going to be doing intermittent, little exams about each chapter topic. What's going to happen is we are going to have the first half of the class, and we're going to talk about a lot. And then we're going to have a midterm. And it's going to be a big midterm. Then we're going to have the other half of the class, and then you're going to have an exam on all of that. So there are 2 exams in this class. Those are going to be worth 50% of your course grade, so midterm, final exam. I am going to prepare you for this. My midterms and final exams, anyone who's ever taken them in previous classes, they tend to say that they are difficult, but they are very straightforward. There are no surprises. People tend to like my exams a lot, at least in my 300 level class. So don't be intimidated by this, but realize that you're going to have to keep up on the material for quite a while before you are examined on it. So please be aware. Grade calculation, like I said, that's going to be done in Blackboard, but if you're curious about exactly what the formula is, here you go right here. In terms of class expectations, like I said, you need Blackboard. For attendance, please arrive on time. The big thing for this class is that we're going to be talking a lot, and so I need you guys here. Right now, so we are missing 4 people. I know one of them has contacted me, and so that's fine. But it would really suck if you guys stopped showing up and then we only have 1 or 2 people who show up. It's really difficult to have a conversation that way. So please, I am relying on you to be here. And if you can't be here for some reason, of course that's okay, but make sure that you tell me. Send me an email before class and say, hey, listen, I'm sick today, or I have this, whatever's going on. Try to avoid missing class, but if you absolutely have to, just let me know so that I'm prepared for who's not going to be here, okay? And that'll help me with these discussions a bit. All right, so arrive to class on time. You can't enter from the back, so that's fine, just enter on time. The thing about entering late in a room like this is if you enter this door after class has started, you are inevitably going to interrupt lecture. You open that door, all the students look at the door, someone's walking in, they're paying attention to that person, and it's usually a solid, 10, 15 seconds before I really get everyone's attention back. So please arrive on time, just not to distract everybody. Make sure to complete the reading assignments, do the discussion questions. I tend not to call on people to participate, but if people are really not talking to one another, then I will do that. If you miss class, make sure you get the notes from somebody. Never say to me or any other professor, I missed class, did we cover anything important? Yeah, absolutely, I was here, I taught, of course it was important. So, make sure you get those notes from another student. And if you need to miss class, let me know. If you're not in the habit of linking your USC, checking your USC email account, make sure that you are linking it to your personal account. One way or another, make sure you're getting my emails. I will communicate with you quite a bit via email. So please make sure that you are checking that. And then let me know if you expect to be excessively absent. That helps me help you. So in terms of avoiding disrupting class and technology, you guys can use technology. I know that there's a big push for there to be no cell phones, no computers in the classroom. You're adults at this point. I trust you guys to kind of regulate yourself in this way. I just want you to be aware that if you do have your phone out or your computer out, the thing about especially a phone is that it's I don't know, even I feel this in myself. I'm very trained to be tethered to this thing such that if a message pops up, I'm going to pay attention to it. So if you have this out during class and you get a text from someone or you get an email from someone, you're going to want to pay attention to it at least for a few seconds, and that might happen multiple times throughout the class. Don't put yourself in a situation where your technology is distracting you again and again. That's something that you have to do for yourself. I'm not going to do that for you. But be aware that it is possible to distract yourself and distract other people. I don't think that's going to be a problem in this class because there are so few of you. But it's possible, say, to sit in front of someone, have your laptop open, and then they see everything that's going on your laptop, and that's very distracting to them, even if you're dealing with it just fine. The course schedule, like I said, appears at the end of the syllabus and on Blackboard. Academic conduct. The big thing here with academic conduct, most of you I think are going to act respectfully, but one of the things that's really easy to do now is to accidentally plagiarize. So plagiarism is passing someone else's work off as your own. People do this without realizing it. Even if you quote someone excessively, if you quote too much, that could be considered plagiarism because you're not writing your own work, you're passing someone else's work off as your own. And then this really becomes a problem with artificial intelligence. I don't know what your guys' practices are in terms of using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever in order to write stuff for you. Here's my policy. Be responsible about it. Now, AI can jeopardize my ability to evaluate you because what can happen here is if you are relying on AI to write stuff for you, that can actually interfere with your personal struggle to master the subject matter. If you don't realize this already, a lot of learning comes from you personally engaging and struggling and failing with something until you get better at it. So if you're using AI to just be good at it right away and you don't have that personal struggle, you're probably damaging your educational experience. So what I suggest instead is if you're going to use AI, use it as a copy editor, meaning you write the essay first, write it yourself, struggle with it, then when it's there and it feels kind of messy and it's drafted and you're not sure if it looks great, feed the entire essay to AI. And then it'll tell you, oh, you misspelled this, or this doesn't flow well, or you could alter this. That's what AI is best for. So write the paper first, then use AI to edit it. That is my suggestion for, again, not using this irresponsibly. But the other thing with plagiarism, the way the AI works is it writes by pulling bits of information from throughout the internet and things that have been fed to it. And so it's possible that if you use something that AI has written itself, it could have plagiarized it from someone else and you would never know. But what I do is I put all of my writing assignments through something called Safe Assign. It's a program that the university professors get access to, and that tells me how much of your paper has been plagiarized from elsewhere. It'll tell me whether there are sentences lifted from anywhere. So please don't exclusively rely on AI. It's you put yourself in a potentially bad situation. With plagiarism, usually the softest punishment for that is you get a 0 for the class. You just fail. But in the extreme cases, you could get expelled from the university. So please don't put yourself in that situation. All right. There's that course schedule. And if you're curious about how the grades convert to letters, etc., if you happen to need that information, it's all there at the end of the syllabus. Questions about the syllabus so far? All right, we're getting through the dry stuff. We're getting there. So I want to go back to Blackboard real quick. Now that we've talked about the discussion questions, if you're looking for the readings for that day, so if you're looking for any of these named, I closed it. If you're looking for any of those named documents, the Bus 2023 or the Fitzpatrick 2018, if you're looking for any of those kinds of readings, they are here underneath assigned readings and discussion questions. Then the discussion questions for each day are right. The submission portal for each discussion question is right there. So you'll write your discussion questions out. You click on this. You upload it as a Word document. You submit it, and that's you submitting your discussion question for that day. All right. Let's see. That's that. For the term paper, give me 1 second. I think this. To hook this up real quick. I anticipated that a few people might be absent because a lot of people are sick right now, so I'm actually recording this first class in case anyone wants a copy of that. All right. For the term paper. The term paper submission links, you're going to have 5 different assignments. The links are here. And then a description of each assignment is right here in this term paper outline. This is what the term paper outline looks like. I'm going to read this first section to you, which is just kind of my poetic little way of explaining why these term papers are important, why you're going to be completing these assignments in the way that you are throughout the semester. And then I'll start going through some of what I expect. So here we go. Humans form beliefs about what is true and what is not. We form these beliefs by observing the world around us. We detect associations, and then we use knowledge of those associations to make decisions about our world, about our environment. So brains are well designed to detect and record patterns. They're there to detect associations. But sometimes we're going to detect and record patterns that aren't actually real. That is, we believe things that seem true but may not actually be true. And so to overcome this problem, we've developed the scientific method. What the scientific method is it's a series of procedures for assessing the truthfulness of a belief that you hold. You're going to test it. So for this class, you're going to use the scientific method to test a belief that you have about sex, sexuality, or sexual behavior. To do so, you're going to assemble a term paper by submitting 5 assignments to me throughout the semester. For these assignments, you're going to first produce a set of research questions about, I should say sexuality, not marriage, sexuality and sexual behavior. You're then going to select one of the research questions that you have, just any topic that you want to talk about. You're going to select one of those research questions, and you're going to perform a literature review of primary, peer-reviewed journal articles that present data on your research topic. You're going to figure out what we already know about your topic. You're then going to develop a study with an experiment, and we'll talk about what an experiment is and what it needs to look like. You're going to design an experiment that addresses some unresolved question within that scientific literature. Like I said, you're going to summarize it, and then you're going to try and find some question that has not yet been addressed. Then, once you've designed this experiment, you're not going to actually perform it, but you're going to go through all the steps of planning it out. You're going to discuss how the expected outcomes of your study will advance current science and the general knowledge about your topic. So you're going to be writing really a full, good, long, this is eventually probably going to be something like 9 to 12 pages, a pretty long original research proposal. If you do this well, this is something that you could, there are grant opportunities available through the university if you want to do independent research on any sexual topic, on relationships, on anything. You can apply for a grant to do that. And it would require a proposal like this. So if you put this together for class and then you want to do that, you want to try to compete for a grant, you're going to be ready for it. So that's one of the hopeful incentives for doing this well. But in general, if you do this assignment thoroughly, if you take your time, you're going to notice that you get better at certain things that you've probably not practiced very much, like putting together a literature review or like designing an experiment about something like sexuality. So, descriptions for each of these assignments are going to begin on the next page. Be mindful of the due dates, which appear in the syllabus, and each assignment should be submitted via Blackboard by its due date. And then there are formatting guidelines here about what each assignment needs to look like. But here, I want to just introduce you to the first assignment, because this is going to be due not next class, but the following. For the first assignment, all you're going to do is you're going to write 3 complete, thoughtful sentences, and this is what should be included. The first step in assessing whether something you believe is true or not is to just identify that you hold that belief. All right, so you're going to figure out what you already believe about your topic. Browse your textbook, or go online, or just sit at home in the tub or whatever and think about some topic that you're interested in, and then identify it. Once you've identified that topic, then begin to think about what you already know about it. For example, if you're interested in learning more about non-monogamy, that is having a romantic, sexual, or otherwise intimate relationship with more than one person, think about what you already know, or at least that you believe you know about non-monogamy. Why don't people have more than one sexual partner? What are the personality traits that maybe attract people to non-monogamy? How risky is it? I think intuitively, you think it's very, very risky. Is that true or not? Maybe that's not a belief that's founded. Why do people do it? Do men and women experience non-monogamy similarly, or do they have similar interests in it? Or are they interested in it for different reasons? What's the difference between something like polyamory versus infidelity? Or how do people treat or perceive people who are non-monogamous? These are all viable questions. It doesn't matter what the question is, as long as you're going to be motivated to research it, right? The most important part of this first step is don't dedicate yourself to some tired, uninspiring topic. You're going to be thinking about this a lot. So put some energy into it. You have about a week and a half to think about this, but what do you want to learn? What do you personally want to deep dive in this class through this term paper? So spend some time with your topic, browse the internet for information, search. You can even start searching for peer-reviewed articles if you want to. Jot down those burning questions about your topic. So for the first assignment, I want you to just generate a 3-sentence summary of your research topic, and then submit this to me on Blackboard. What I'll then do is I'll look at it, I'll give you some feedback, I'll say, yeah, I think this is a good topic, I think you'll find a lot, or, oh, maybe you'll have a hard time finding research on this topic, maybe you need to narrow it down, maybe you need to broaden it a little bit. I'll give you feedback, I'll get you on the right track, okay? Then, when we get to assignment number 2, that's when we'll begin the literature review. And so I'm not gonna read this now, we'll come back to this once I give you feedback, but for each of these assignments, I have on this outline everything just typed out already in great detail. So if as you start to do these assignments, just follow the instructions very carefully and you should do well. Okay? At this point, questions about the term paper. Okay. Like I said, just start thinking about whatever topic you want to research, and we'll go from there. All right. Otherwise, the one other thing I need to ask you guys to do before next time So you have that student information sheet. This is a requirement that they're introducing for the university. For every class, you need to take a participation confirmation quiz. Literally, you click on this and it says, did you show up for class one day? And you say yes, you submit it, and then it's done. They just want to know that you've showed up to class once. So make sure you do that, submit that before next time. All right? Questions about Blackboard or anything about the management of this class? Then, in that case, let's get into some juicy stuff. Some other class policy, well, this isn't that juicy yet, but like I said, there's no quizzes, no intermittent exams. My logic for this is a 300 level class. If you've not been in a 300 level class before, I expect you to take responsibility for your own education. I hold people's hands a lot in Psych 101 and in my other classes. With a 300 level class, you guys are, you're college students, you're ready to kind of deep dive some of the toughest questions on this topic. I want you to take responsibility for that. So make sure you're practicing some time management skills, checking your emails, and if you have any difficulties, reach out to me, right? I want to see you succeed. And I know that, you know, not everyone, I know a lot more about this topic than you guys do, and so sometimes I might assign something or ask you to do something that you really don't know how to do, and I'm a little oblivious to that. If you're having difficulty, that might not be your problem. Maybe it's my problem. So if you're having troubles, come to me and say, I just don't understand this. Could you give me a little bit more instruction? I am happy to do that, okay? All right, juicy stuff. What are we gonna talk about in this class? We're gonna get through some pretty fun stuff. The first thing that we are going to be doing is we're going to be talking about sex and gender and differentiating what these terms mean. I think people throw around the terms sex, they throw around the term gender, and they don't really define them. So we're first gonna just start with that. Then, like I said, we're gonna get into a bit of biology. We're gonna talk about the process of evolution. We'll talk about that because that has shaped a lot of our sexuality. We'll talk about male and female anatomy, fertility and pregnancy, how that happens, a lot of nuts and bolts stuff. Contraception is birth control, and then abortion as well. And then we get into sex and gender development, like I mentioned. We'll talk about what it means to be transgender. We'll look at love. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Romantic relationships. We'll talk about jealousy, infidelity. Talk about sexual orientation. And throughout, one of the things that I really love to talk about is sexual ethics. That is, what is okay versus not okay to do in a relationship or in a sexual relationship? Are there things that you can do sexually that might hurt people? And so that is one of the threads that is going to be following us throughout this class, just because I like to think about those kinds of topics. But here are our class premises. And by a premise, I mean this is an assumption that I am making from the get-go. So I want to go over these premises with you before we start and make sure that we don't disagree about them. Our first premise is that sexuality, human sexual behavior, is produced by the brain. That anything that you do, any interests that you have, any behaviors that you make, any preferences that you reveal to someone, any time that you're interacting with someone in a relationship, all of that is ultimately arising from the brain. Your nervous system is there as a way to well, we'll actually talk about that in a second. So sexuality, everything that we're about to talk about is being produced by the brain. Premise number 2 is that the brain is a biological entity. It's this thing, it's physical, it exists in the world, and so we can talk physically about it and its parts. Number 3, the brain and your nervous system, broadly speaking, permit an organism to do what? Why do you have a brain and nervous system? What does your nervous system do for you?
Reacts to stimuli.
Yeah, okay, there's reaction. Other parts of this.
It also helps regulate your internal structures.
Okay, good. So there's information being shared within your body, right? There's something that your liver might need to know given what your kidney's doing, or something that your muscles need to know given what's outside and potentially threatening to you. Maybe you need to innervate your muscles to run away, right? What your brain and nervous system does is it allows you to respond to your environment. Okay, so if sexuality is produced by the brain is biological, and this brain and nervous system is helping you respond to its environment, we can also then say that the brain is shaped by your environment. If it's helping you to respond to the world, your brain in part is going to develop in response to the world around you. Therefore, the big premise is that your sexuality is going to be this product. It's going to be a combined product of your biology as well as the experiences that you have throughout life and how you interact with your environment. All right, so here's my first big question to you guys. Do you disagree with anything written here? Do you question any of these premises, these assumptions that we're making at the outset of the class? Does anything not ring true to you?
I don't think that sexuality is just a product of your biology.
Ah, okay. In what way? Yeah.
I think that it has, I think that for some people, yeah, but not everyone.
So maybe it contributes more for some people than others? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Okay, so maybe there's this kind of balancing. So I think I would agree, and I think that's why I kind of stipulate this here, right? Is your biology's, so the softer claim here, I take your criticism well, the softer claim here is that your biology is always going to contribute something. Right? It's not that your sexuality exists completely independent of your biology, right? Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. But maybe, if we're looking at maybe what you end up doing sexually or what your sexual orientation, this is a funny, we're actually going to get into this. It turns out for a very long time we thought sexual orientation was primarily controlled by biology, that you were born that way. Turns out that's not entirely true. And in fact, early life experiences and experiences throughout life can change your sexual orientation to some degree. People's sexual orientation shifts. There's fluidity. And that seems to be in response to the environment. So yes, there's something biological, but then maybe environment matters a lot compared to biology. So okay, good. I like that. That's a good criticism. So if we're saying, yes, there's at least some biology in there. Other criticisms or other things that we question here? Well, think about this. What you're going to be doing for next time, like I said, and I think we have about, how much time we got left? All right, we still have a few minutes. For next time, you're going to be doing your first reading from the appendix, and you're going to be writing discussion questions. And I want to give you a taste of what those discussion questions should look like. What's going to start a good discussion in class? So I have a few that are not based on a reading, but that I think will give you an idea of what I'm looking for. These are questions that don't have a clear answer. These are questions that are going to, when asked to other people, make people go, oh, okay, well, it could go this way, it could go this way. We're going to have a discussion about it. So questions like this, and maybe we can start to tackle these. What do you guys think? Are men and women more different or alike?
I would say alike because we're both humans and we're the same species. I think comparatively in terms of the world as a whole, we're more alike.
Ah, okay, good. So yeah, to the extent that we are all humans, and humans have these characteristics that are shared across all humans, I mean, both men and women are human, right? The things that men and women share, we have goals. We seek status. We like to educate ourselves. We usually like to form families. We like to make friends with people, friends that we trust. Those characteristics tend to be shared. So in a lot of ways, men and women are alike. And sorry, what was the last part? We're different in what way? How are we different? How are men and women typically different?
I would say, I was going to agree and say that we're more alike, but I think why it comes across that we're so different is societal views
Ah.
on what women can do versus like what is not okay for a man, as in terms of like crying and like who's the provider, where's the pants and things like that.
Yeah, so we put pressure on each other, right? We put pressure on each other to act a certain way, given maybe what biological traits we have, right? Do you look like you have breasts? You have a relatively more kind of narrow jaw as opposed to a larger jaw? Is your voice deeper versus higher? And based on those traits, we might start to assume things about people or expect them to act in a certain way, expect women to be a certain way, or expect men to be a certain way. Yeah, okay. So maybe that's where a lot of those differences come from. Other thoughts on this? What other ways are we different? Or maybe why are we different? My personal answer to this would be, I think I actually agree with you, Megan. I think that I think men and women are more alike than they are different, but the ways in which we are different are very important to us for one reason or another, right? And I think a lot of it ultimately comes back to the fact that men and women have different machinery for reproduction, and we'll see how that matters. That's where I land on that. All right, how about, I kind of want to skip to this one at the very end here. If your romantic partner watches porn regularly, does that mean that they are not or less attracted to you?
No.
At least I wouldn't say so.
Okay. What's your logic? Because I've heard, I will tell you, like 10 years ago, I think it was the complete opposite. Most people were like, yeah, porn is destroying relationships.
No, I don't think so. I think it's healthy to have your own kind of, how to explain it, time outside of your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I've personally dealt with people who are hypersexual,
Mm-hmm.
whereas other people could not be hypersexual. So it's kind of that imbalance where watching porn would be an outlet to help that hypersexual person that the other person in the relationship can't maybe always have that tendency.
I like that. Yeah, it's almost to the degree that there could be kind of a mismatch between sex drive for whatever reason, right? It doesn't even have to be that maybe you're just a hypersexual person, but even in moments maybe where one person's feeling it and the other person's not feeling it, should you just, have sex in order to appease the other person? Or maybe is the responsible thing to kind of, hey, I don't want to force you into sex, so I'm going to go do something that is just for me, right? Okay, I like that. Other thoughts on this?
The way that I see like watching porn, it almost is kind of like cartoony, like that's not real life. So like watching it is like, to me it's almost the same thing as like watching a movie and like thinking a character movie is like hot. It doesn't make me think less of my partner.
Yeah.
Or make me not attracted to my partner. It's like unattainable and not real life.
Right. It's almost, it's like you can tell the difference between fantasy and reality, right? Where they might fill totally different roles in your life, right? Is you have a partner, you have a sexual partner or a romantic partner for one reason, and you interact with them, and you hold down a daily life, and you pursue goals together, and you're intimate together, and then maybe porn is just this kind of separate thing that you do personally. Some people, I think many people at this point, they watch porn with their partner, right? And we're finding out that one of the things that might be problematic about porn use, when it is problematic, is that people are maybe they're going off and they're using it themselves, but they're using it in a way that does detract from how often they have sex with their partner. And in those scenarios, if you, with your partner, kind of learn maybe some pornography that you can watch together or enjoy together, that can bring people together. So yeah, I think this is another one of those questions. When I started asking this 10 years ago, people had very different opinions. We're just about out of time, but I want to show you these questions as well in case they inspire you and any of the discussion questions that you have. But things like, is hormonal contraception or birth controls completely safe? This is kind of an open question, and we'll go over some of the evidence for and against. Whether children with homosexual parents have worse life outcomes. A lot of people think that they do. A lot of people think that they don't. What does the evidence say? We'll get into some of that. We'll talk about things like incest. Incest is having sex with, reproducing with someone who is genetically related to you. We know that to some degree it's harmful because children who are born by siblings, they tend to inherit, if there's something genetically that could be harmful to a person within a family's lineage, if you have two family members having a child, the probability of that child having that inheriting whatever problematic gene that might be or whatever kind of genetic disorder that might be, the chances are much higher. So there is risk to incest. It is harmful. But there are places in the world where incest is legal and they regulate it and they allow it. So is it always a harmful practice? And then we can talk about non-monogamy as well. Anyway, these are some examples of discussion questions. Again, for next time, I expect you to do the first reading and then complete the first set of reading discussion questions, have those turned in before class on Wednesday. All right? And then start thinking about that first term paper assignment, which will be due the following class. Questions, concerns? Are we excited? We ready for this class? I think it'll be good. You guys seem bright and ready to go, so I'm excited. All right. Thank you all for being here. I'll try to get some more bodies in here for next time, and we'll go from there. Thanks, guys.